My Journey to Outer Space. An engineer, astronaut, and social entrepreneur. Sara Sabry is best known for becoming the first Egyptian and the first Arab woman and African woman to travel into space. From up there, how did her views change on human endurance and womanhood?
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
To this wonderful stage where you've been greeted by an audience that cannot wait to hear more from you. Now, I'm geeking out completely. I'm just so excited to firstly be in your presence by virtue of the fact that you've taken a route that is not very often traveled. You're in a space that is male-dominated. You are the first of many, first African, first Arab, to go to outer space. And aside from wanting to find out what made you want to leave Earth, I want to start off by understanding what inspired you to pursue this career.
I mean, trying to be in the career of the space field basically is really difficult because we don't really have a path there to get there from our side of the world. And also I grew up in Egypt, and in Egypt we're not really exposed to the space field. We don't have rocket launches, we don't have astronauts from our side of the world. So it's not really something that you can dream about when you're growing up because it's always something that's not for you. So for me, it wasn't something that I was dreaming about as a child. I was just a very, very curious person, and that's why I studied mechanical engineering, did mechatronics, worked on Formula 3 cars, did my master's in biomedical engineering, worked in stem cells, robotic surgery, augmented reality for a bit, also in the industry. So it was always doing things that are just, yes, challenging, but it was always about, understanding it. I'm just a very, very curious person, and everything that I've done up until today is just something that that I just find extremely curious, and I have this very obsessive quality where if I want to understand something, I just can't let it go. And I think we tend to lose that as we grow older. When we're young, we keep asking the same question again and again and again. As we grow older, if we don't get an answer, we kind of let it go. We learn because of our society, because of everything around us, to let go more. And let it go is a good thing for some things. But also when you're sticking to your intuition, sticking to what you think has to be done, also can come as a benefit. It is difficult, it's not easy, but also it's very rewarding at the end of the day. So after I finished my master's and I was working in industry and I was doing research while working a full-time job and while founding a company. So it was a very, very intense time in my life where I was just asking a lot of questions about the world, and that's what was motivating me. That's what was waking me up at 4:30 in the morning and just working. And I had 2 hours break during my day, and I would count those 2 hours where these are my hours for food. But it was always about pursuing those answers. And how do we push humanity to become multiplanetary? Because this is the way that we're going to have those answers. And that's what led me to the space field.
It's such an interesting point of view that you have, I guess, because you're looking at humanity from outside Earth. How has your experience shaped the way you view the future of our society and also the future of our continent?
So I was sent to space to analyze something called the overview effect, which is this change in perspective that happens to you when you see Earth from space. And as an engineer, I'm also a skeptic, but also very open to changing my mind about everything. Because you have to be open to getting the data and making your own opinion about whatever you're getting. So when I went to space and I saw Earth from space, it turned out to be a lot more profound than I thought it was going to be. It really does change your perspective on the scale of the world, on the interconnectedness of humanity between itself, and humanity and the rest of the world, and humanity and the universe. So you get this new perspective of the borders don't really exist. So there's a few points to it, and it took me a while to be able to explain this. When I came back, everything felt so weird, and I couldn't really understand why I was feeling this way. So I had to, as an engineer, write it down in bullet points, of course, just breaking down, try to understand, so why am I feeling this way? And it is the overview effect, and it's always going to be different for different people. And because I was the first one from this side of the world to have done it, I've only heard people from the West talk about the overview effect. So I was wondering, would it be different? But we don't know. We don't have enough data yet, so we need to be sending more people from our side of the world to really be able to understand what these effects are. So for instance, you hear a lot of astronauts talk about the lack of borders. You know, when you see Earth from space, there are no borders on the map. And they've actually been, if you look at what's actually how these borders have been made, there were some men centuries ago sitting in a room and just splitting countries. Yeah. They split Africa this way. They split Europe. They split the whole world, Asia, everything. So how does that make sense? And how are these lines that were drawn by these old white men in a room, you know, how are these lines dictating everything that we can or cannot do in our lives? It makes absolutely no sense. And we've seen that all the...
Yeah, that's a clap.
And we can see that all the conflict and everything that's going on in our world is created because of those lines on the map. So getting into the space field, for example, it's very inaccessible. And not a lot of people know this, but as someone I'm from Egypt, and from Egypt, from Africa, from the Arab world, you cannot work in the space field because there are very limited opportunities, and you cannot work outside the country because companies can only hire people from their own nationalities. So there are laws that are written that make it inaccessible, that stop us from working in the field, and that make the field very inaccessible. But then you look on the other side, where the UN Outer Space Treaty, which is the only big treaty that is, you know, that has been signed by a lot of different nations. We call them nations. So that one, it says that international collaboration is a big priority, but then you see these laws that are stopping it, and then you see that, okay, we're not supposed to use military, but we are. So there's a lot of conflicting things where when I got introduced to the space field more and more, I was learning more about space law and then international law. So how do we enforce international law? How are we seeing everything that's going on now in Palestine, in Sudan, in Congo, in every place in the world? How are we not able to enforce international law? South Africa has done such an incredible push for this. And it's seriously, I have so much respect and admiration because they understand. You know, and I think having colonization, it needs to be illegal. Like, how are we in 2024 and how is this still happening? Like, how are we dealing with the same thing again and again? We're seeing in Afghanistan, women who it's just illegal to be even a woman. Yeah. You know, it's illegal to be Arab in the Middle East, in your own land. You know, so we're seeing things that, how are we still in 2024 not able to see through all this BS? You know, so it's really. So we need to talk about it, but not only talk about it. And I see that we are talking about it more and more now, but we need to come to action now. How do we change things to the better, to make it more equitable? Not, you know, we don't need equality, we need equity. Yeah. You know, so it's really for women, for different, you know, everything. So it doesn't. Like, we're all the same. And I think for me as an engineer, I never really thought that I would get involved in politics or law or policy or government or things like this. But that's one of the effects of the overview effect. So because you see Earth from space, you see that there are no borders. You see this very thin blue line, and that's literally the only thing protecting us from space. And you realize that we're all on this one planet together. So we need to be working together. We can't just wait for another entity, you know, because we're human beings here. And until we understand that we're all human beings, and I'm afraid that the only way we're going to be understanding that we're all going to need to be working together is if there's something else that's going to be coming along. We can't wait for that day. We need to be understanding now that we are exactly all the same. So how do we do that? How do we push forward? So there's a lot of things that we need action. So if anyone here in this room has, you know, interest in this or is passionate about doing something or has resources or ideas or connections to really try to push forward, we're really trying to do this. So my team and I, we're working on different projects. So aside from my work in the space field, I also do things in this side of in human rights and
advocacy.
And advocacy, yes.
So what you're saying is very profound. The overview effect ultimately has the power to shift cultural perspectives, to remove borders, but also, I feel, a sense of urgency in terms of actually going into space and exploring what is there. As African nations, are we investing enough in space exploration? And what could be the underlying benefit if we were to maximize the opportunities there?
That's a really good question. So Africa's doing a lot, but it could be doing more. And without getting too much into geopolitics and without being negative about some things, it's really, it's a challenge. It's not easy, and we have to be realistic about it. But it is very possible. So South Africa's actually, SANZA here, the South African Space Agency, is doing great things. The Egyptian Space Agency is doing some things. They've created the African Space Agency in Egypt now. So hopefully uniting all these forces, uniting resources, power, knowledge, we can really be able to push the field forward for the entire continent and bring those benefits back to Earth. So in terms of the space field, it really touches so many different fields. And I'm sure every single one of us here is using, on a day-to-day basis, something that has come from the space field. Memory of foam, things in the medical industry, things in agriculture. A lot of these have been initially designed for the space field, and sometimes just accidentally were kind of thought to be, oh, maybe they actually could be useful for something else here on Earth. But also, on the other side is that there's so much research being done on the International Space Station that has been orbiting Earth for the past 20 years with people on board. And there's so much research being done there that we're using here on Earth. For instance, as we age, we all get bone demineralization. It means we lose bone density as we age. And this is going to happen to most of us. And it's normal. It's just the way our bodies are aging. So how do we slow that down? When astronauts are in space, because of the lack of perceived gravity, so you're in microgravity, you still have gravity, but because you're in free fall constantly around Earth, it's lack of perceived gravity. So it's not zero gravity. It's microgravity, you don't feel it. So technically, you're in, anyway, without getting into today. So in space, you don't have the same gravity, that you don't feel the gravity, so your bones don't have incentive to produce more cells. And because of that, you keep losing density and nothing telling it to do more. So this is how bone demineralization happens, and the same thing happens with your muscles. A lot of different things happens in your cardiovascular system, your vestibular system, your ocular system, so different things. And we're using these, these technologies or pharmaceuticals basically that we're developing for space to really slow down these effects, to counteract these, to mitigate these effects basically. We're using them here on Earth too.
Wow.
So things that are, so as soon as we understand the real benefits, the really understanding how do we monitor the weather? Right now we can't just rely on getting satellite imagery, which every single person here, I am sure, is using on their phones every day with GPS. But some countries are having to buy the data from other countries. But can you rely on another country your whole life? Because now the other country is holding something on you. So it's all geopolitical. Every single country needs to have its own, its own power, its own agency. We need to have our own agency here. We need to have our own lack of dependence on someone else. And we need to have a seat at the table. So the more we're involved in the space field, the more you have power geopolitically, the more you have agency, the more you're not going to be depending on someone else, the more you're going to grow in that way and help support the community. So it's just a ripple effect at the end of the day, and it's just about communicating all these benefits, agriculture-wise, technology-wise, medical-wise, education-wise, inspiration-wise. Just seeing that this is possible kids can remain in school without thinking, because in Egypt it's the same thing. I hear kids saying, oh no, I want to work now to help my family because we need money now. And I understand that, but your parents are working 2 jobs to help you with this. So just stay, they are wanting you to stay, and education is going to give you control, because education gave me control.
Absolutely.
My dad spent 80% of his salary on our education for my siblings and I, which is a big investment.
And it's inspiring. And with everything that you're saying, this is a narrative that we hear all too often, where in order for us as Africans, as African women, to have a seat at a table, we need to start occupying spaces. We need to start investing in our education, having conversations, sharing. Those of us who have been privileged enough to reach certain levels, as was said by Dr. Gwen earlier this morning, have a responsibility to lift others up. And that is what you're doing today. So I want to give you a very big thank you. And I trust that many will be inspired by your story and that we'll see more female African astronauts taking over space. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sara Sabry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.